Even more of the Red Bull's RB20 secrets, which they have been hiding up until the very last possible moment, have been uncovered today during the first day of F1 preseason testing. And it's something that is going to help them dominate the upcoming 2024 season, which is of course bad news for the rest of the grid. This particular piece of aero innovation that the team have designed and installed on their 24 Challenger, the RB20, is something that hasn't been seen on any of the cars this season, or for that matter any previous year, and has no doubt left the entire paddock intrigued by its introduction. And what I'm talking about is the inlet which has finally been opened up on their cannons, which are housed on their engine cover. And I believe they're using this inlet in a particular manner from which it will help them achieve a certain objective of theirs by the introduction of this device. Now, add that to the fact that they have designed and sculpted these cannons in a much more extreme manner than Mercedes ever did, with their cannons openings aimed directly towards the diffuser, then you're looking at quite possibly two areas from which airflow can be directed towards said diffuser in a central manner. Now, what is this certain objective they are actually trying to achieve? Is it all to gain a benefit when it comes to cooling of the internals, or is this all simply for an aero gain? Well, me personally, I believe this is all for an aero gain. Now, what I believe they're trying to achieve with this inlet is to simply guide air through the cannon's interior and out towards the diffuser. Now, I want to stress, this is just my interpretation of what they're doing with this inlet, and they could quite easily be using it simply to help cool the internals of the car. It's something we won't know unless the team tell us. Regardless, let's take a look at how this one simple innovation that Red Bull took from Mercedes' W14 and introduced on their RB20 could help give them such a huge benefit from the way they've interpreted it. As Red Bull have introduced a new design for their RB20, and it might look familiar to you as it's something that was first seen on the W14 last season. But in the case of Red Bull's version, this particular engine cover is far more extreme in comparison to that of the W14's, particularly with the sculpting of the cannons, as they act as both an aero and cooling device, with the end of the cannon sloping down towards the floor and diffuser in a much more dramatic style than that of the W14's ever did. And once again, we can use the 3D render model of the RB20 to see just how extremely far back this engine cover now goes, and we get a real understanding of how the airflow is going to make its way to the diffuser. Now, add into that fact that today we found out there's an actual opening at the front of these cannons, right just behind where the halo ends. Then this makes this whole cannon situation a whole lot more interesting. And from what I believe them to be doing is, of course, making the air, which is coming off of the halo and going through the inlet now, it's now traveling along the cannon internals and is now exiting from the rear of it. And as we can see from the previous image where we had a 3D render of the car, and now also from today's pictures, we can quite clearly see that the exit goes directly to the center of the diffuser on the RB20, and that's why I believe this is being used as an aero device. I think they've got enough cooling from the inlet, and they've probably got even more advanced technology than on the previous years, and they don't actually need to have any additional cooling with the RB20. Also, as you can already see on the engine cover from today, they've got openings on there as well anyway. So I think they have more than ample openings throughout the rear end of the RB20 that this is actually being used for an aero device. And speaking of the inlets, let's just quickly go over the entire sideboard portion of the RB20 and how it takes precedence from the Mercedes W13 and W14. While both of the teams opted to include an overbite instead of a underbite on their sidepod designs, there is quite a difference to be seen in their installations of them, and for good reason. When it comes to Mercedes and both the W13 and 14, they had their overbite detached from their overall zero-pod concept because, quite obviously, there is no sidepod to attach it to, and they needed to implement this as part of their upper side impact structure. Whereas the difference with Red Bull and their RB20 is that it is attached to part of their sidepod, because they do have a considerable sidepod installed on their car, albeit one with a massive undercut thanks to this installation of the overbite now. One particular area of interest on the RB20, even before the official launch on Thursday, was that of their sidepods, and these were a huge talking point among the F1 technical side of the community. And in particular, this was all to do with the inlet layout of this car. This came about after Red Bull's shakedown on Wednesday at Silverstone was leaked, and we got our first look at the RB20 in action. But thankfully, on Thursday we did end up getting shots of these inlets. But the inlet we did see on the launch car at the event isn't actually being used to cool the car. Oh no. Instead, it's the team's S-duct for the RB20. This is something that Ferrari have used over the past 2 seasons. As you can see, the positions on both the SF24 and RB20 are very similar. So now I guess you're wondering, well, where exactly is the sidepod inlet then for all the cooling of the internals? Well, we have a 3D model of the RB20 that was on the Red Bull team's website, and thanks to that we were able to discover exactly where that is. As you can see, the inlet for all the cooling of the internals is in a much more traditional area of the sidepods. So in closing, the vertical slot is being used as the S-duct, and somewhere which we can't currently see on the sidepods is going to be an exit for it. And then under the overbite on the RB20 is where the inlet for the internals is. And one final point I would like to make on the sidepods is the actual amount of space they've been able to free up this season with their undercut. As you can see, it's a drastically reshaped profile from that of the RB19, as you can see on the screen here. Now, I think this is slightly thanks to the overbite on this RB20 sidepod design. You can see it's helped free up a bit of space, but also I believe the internals of this particular version of the sidepods, they've been shifting around where they're housing certain components, and I think they've put it a lot more further down and maybe changed the kind of positioning within the sidepod to allow for such a dramatic increase in undercut on the RB20's version of their sidepods. Right guys, that's the video. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, leave a like and leave comments down below. And I'll catch you all in another Formula 1 video.